Evelyn Taylor sat at her desk in the small town's historical society office, surrounded by old photographs and dusty archives. She was the town's resident historian and had always been fascinated by the stories of her community's past. But there was one legend that sent shivers down her spine, the tale of the sleepwalking curse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, Evelyn locked up the office and headed home. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the sound of her footsteps echoing against the cobblestones. The full moon loomed overhead, its silvery light illuminating the path ahead. As she approached her house, Evelyn noticed a figure standing at the end of the street. It was Mrs. Thompson, a frail old woman known for her prophetic visions. She beckoned Evelyn over, her eyes wide with fear. "They're coming," Mrs. Thompson whispered, her voice barely above a hoarse whisper. "The sleepwalkers. Beware the curse." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she quickened her pace towards her house. She had heard the rumors of sleepwalkers wandering the streets at night, their eyes glazed over, their bodies moving as if possessed by some unseen force. But she had always dismissed them as mere superstitions. That night, Evelyn lay in bed, listening to the creaks and groans of her old house. The wind howled outside, sending shivers down her spine. As she drifted off to sleep, a strange dream came over her, a dream of shadowy figures prowling the town streets, their faces twisted in agony. The next morning, Evelyn awoke to the sound of sirens blaring outside. Rushing to the window, she saw a crowd gathered in the town square, their faces pale with fear. The town sheriff stood in the center, his voice stern as he addressed the crowd. "We have a situation on our hands," he announced, his words heavy with gravity. "There have been reports of sleepwalkers wreaking havoc in our town. We must stay vigilant and come together to face this threat head-on." Evelyn knew she had to investigate. Donning her coat and scarf, she made her way to the town square, where a group of concerned residents had gathered. The sheriff instructed them to search the town for any signs of the mysterious sleepwalkers. As they split up into teams and combed the streets, Evelyn's heart raced with anticipation. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister lurking in the shadows, something ancient and malevolent that had been awakened by the curse. Hours passed, and the sun began to set once again. The search parties reconvened in the town square, their faces weary and grim. The sheriff stepped forward, his expression grave. "We found them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The sleepwalkers." Evelyn's blood ran cold as the sheriff led them to a secluded area on the outskirts of town. There, in a clearing surrounded by gnarled trees, stood a group of figures swaying back and forth in a hypnotic trance. Their eyes were empty, their movements jerky and unnatural. "We must break the curse," the sheriff declared, his voice resolute. "We must find the source of this malevolent force and put an end to it once and for all." Evelyn knew she had to act. Drawing on her knowledge of the town's history, she began to piece together a puzzle that had been centuries in the making. She delved into the archives, searching for clues that would lead her to the truth behind the sleepwalking curse. As the night wore on, Evelyn uncovered a dark secret buried deep within the town's past. Long ago, a group of settlers had been cursed by a vengeful spirit, condemned to wander the streets in a sleepwalking trance for eternity. Their restless souls had been trapped in an endless cycle of torment, feeding on the fear and anguish of the townspeople. Armed with this knowledge, Evelyn returned to the clearing where the sleepwalkers stood. She confronted the spirit that held them captive, its malevolent presence swirling around her like a dark cloud. "I release you," Evelyn declared, her voice ringing with authority. "Be gone, curse, and let these souls find peace." A moment of silence hung heavy in the air, and then, with a deafening wail, the spirit dissipated into the night. The sleepwalkers collapsed to the ground, their bodies still and motionless. The town awoke the next morning to a sense of calm that had long been absent. The curse had been broken, and the sleepwalkers had vanished without a trace. Evelyn stood in the town square, her hands trembling with a mixture of relief and awe. As she looked out at the sun-drenched streets, She knew that the town's darkest chapter had finally come to an end. The sleepwalking curse had been lifted, and the residents could finally rest easy knowing that their community was safe once more. But Evelyn also knew that the past was never truly forgotten, and that the shadows of history would always linger, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek the truth. And so, she continued her work as the town's historian, forever vigilant for any signs of the malevolent forces that lurked in the shadows.